Greetings and salutations, Internet. My name is Kind Death, and today we're going to take a look back at World of Warcraft's 6th expansion, Legion. This video is going to be a subjective retrospective. I encourage you to leave comments below, especially if you disagree with any of my points, or if I forgot an important aspect of the expansion. But please do so respectfully. There is no right or wrong opinions here. I think looking at some of the Battle for Azeroth alpha footage might make it easier taking a look back at Legion, since most of us are tired of that fell green color by about now. With leveling in World of Warcraft Legion, it was the first time we've ever been able to pick the zone that we wanted to go to and for it to scale to our level. Quest scaling was a completely new thing to World of Warcraft. Many other MMOs have implemented it. Blizzard decided to start out with the Broken Isles. I think it worked quite well. I think many of us hoped that they would expand that out to the world, and as we all know in the later aspects of Legion, they did for the leveling in the old world zones. They kind of crunched some of the old expansions like Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King together, and they crunched Mists of Pandaria and Cataclysm together, so you could choose. If you didn't like the Cataclysm zones, you could go right to the Mists of Pandaria ones, or if you didn't like Burning Crusade, you could go right to Wrath of the Lich King. So I think those were overall good things. As far as the questing content went on the Broken Isles, though, I think Suramar was really the pinnacle of World of Warcraft quest content. They did an exceptional job with the questing story, the content, the way it was laid out. Even the pacing was great over a series of weeks. I really felt like Suramar was really something that they should expand upon moving forward with Battle for Azeroth. I enjoyed Val Shara too. I liked the storyline there, but the way that they did Suramar was good. World quests, another huge success for World of Warcraft Legion. I don't think that questing nodes, where you grab a bunch of quests, go out and do your quests, and come back to that one spot, I think that's a good thing for the game. But world quests are engaging enough that you can go, okay, what's this, what's this? You can kind of pull up your map and say, this is where I want to go, and this is what I want to do. I think world quests would be really cool in a place like Arathai, where we're going to have war fronts in Battle for Azeroth. If you do a bunch of world quests that are set up there and things scale up to your level, that's a really cool way to make old world areas relevant again in current gameplay. So I think that's really cool. Artifact weapons were another really big part of Legion. I think they were really engaging in the beginning, especially with you being able to unlock your traits. It kind of felt like the old talent tree system in a lot of ways. There was kind of a nostalgic throwback to that, like really having to think about and choose which traits you wanted to do. Later on in the expansion, when I'm leveling up alts, when I get one piece of artifact power, it's enough to fill in all my traits, plus a couple of concordance of Legion Fall spots, you know, and that's not very fun. There's no choice in that. Not engaging. Wasn't a big fan of the Netherlight Crucible either. Unfortunately, certain items like the Ashbringer and Doomhammer are really iconic weapons. I don't think that those should have ever been be made available to players. They could have created new artifacts like they did for most other specs. I don't know why they didn't do that. But moving forward, when you don't have weapon drops, there's some aspect of the game that's really taken away. Because a lot of our damage or healing or our ability to tank in World of Warcraft comes directly from our weapons or our shield. So to remove any sense of progression where you're looking for a drop to improve your character, I think that detracts from the game overall. That kind of bridges into artifact power. I don't think the artifact power was fun or engaging. In fact, I think artifact power is an absolutely abysmal system. It limits how many classes that you can play. It's very alt unfriendly. It was very spec unfriendly. So if I'm a fire mage and I've dumped all of this artifact power into my fire weapon, they nerf my fire spec for whatever reason, I can't just pivot and change to being frost or arcane. That's not possible, because now I have to go out and farm artifact power for those weapons and I'm going to be behind the 8-ball. That just felt bad. I would argue that actually felt worse than how the legendary system worked. So that's how negative I feel about artifact power. Order halls were another really awesome class fantasy type system that was really fun for the first half of the expansion and it didn't exist in the second half. They just let it die. There wasn't really anything you did after you got your class mount. And some of it was exceptional and some of it was really lackluster. I think priests really got the short end of the stick as far as order halls go, but the concept of class fantasy is something that should be encouraged in World of Warcraft. It makes us feel special, it makes us feel unique. Anything like that in an MMO is good. There's nothing bad that comes from that. I think mission tables are a way for World of Warcraft to keep people engaged with the game through their mobile app. I think that justifies their mobile app in their eyes in a lot of ways, and I think that's why mission tables exist. Legion was also almost Diablo 3 2.0. There's a lot of things that they ripped right out of the game. I mean, whether that you go from artifact power to the invasion points that are kind of like greater rifts, and I think invasion points were a cool concept. I think a lot of the Diablo 3 aspects actually translate quite well to World of Warcraft. I think they went probably a little heavy on that, and the invasion points could have been a lot cooler than they made it sound like they were. We were going to go to these different worlds with different bosses. It was just kind of, it became another drudgery, going through the motions kind of task. Invasion points were very lackluster, especially the greater ones. Long story short, invasion points felt like a very tacked-on addition to the expansion. World of Warcraft Legion, by many accounts, was really a solo player's. If you don't have a guild, you don't like grouping up with other people, World of Warcraft Legion was great for players like that. And the Chromie scenario is one of those great examples, because it's super fun, it's engaging, you do it by yourself. Another good example of that is the Mage Tower Challenge, where it's basically a solo player raid. I think that those things are cool, but I think at the same time, World of Warcraft wants to keep adding these solo player things into the game, which de-incentivizes joining a guild, or grouping up with people, or interacting with other people. And at the end of the day, World of Warcraft is an MMO, and it will always be an MMO, and the more that they try to make it a single-player game, I think the more that it detracts from it. This is never going to be Witcher 3 or Skyrim. Those games are always going to be better than World of Warcraft at what they do. World of Warcraft is an MMO at heart. So a lot of these solo things that are being added to the game, I think, are good, but they need to be mitigated in how much they're added, because they can really detract from the game if too much of it gets added in. Another great part of World of Warcraft Legion was the secrets. The hidden artifact appearances, the hidden mounts, where the secrets Discord came together, the community came together as a whole in the true spirit of an MMO and found out these amazing riddles that were put together. Things that were almost impossible. I don't know how, there's no way any single individual could have solved these riddles, but through collective effort, we were able to do that as a community. And that's pretty freaking awesome. I'd like to see a lot more of that moving forward. I think that's good for the community. Anything that brings the community together in an MMO is a good thing. I think when the community becomes more solo-oriented, when it's based on the individual player, that's when toxicity really comes into the game. I do worry a little bit about the Raider IO and the esports infiltration through Mythic Plus. I don't really think that World of Warcraft is ever going to, because of the time and space where World of Warcraft was designed originally, and a lot of the MMO concepts that came about circa 2004, 2005, did not fit any kind of esports genre. I think you're kind of trying to ram a square peg into a round hole, is what's happening. While I really enjoyed the dungeons in World of Warcraft Legion, I think Black Rook Hole was probably my personal favorite as far as how it was themed, how it was paced, the boss fights, mechanics, everything about it. I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say that there was any dungeons that were kind of iconic that once this expansion's over, I'll really remember that much. I was also a little bit concerned with every single quest line seemed to end in a dungeon. So we moved away from a raid or die mentality to a dungeon or die mentality. I don't think that's good for the game. Mythic Plus dungeons were a great addition to the game. It gave you another alternative endgame opposed to raiding. It's still group content. There's a lot of tricks and skill that's required. I think Mythic Plus dungeons were also probably the most successful addition to the game since transmogrification in Cataclysm. They're a huge success. I don't think there's anybody out there that dislikes Mythic Plus. I know there's a lot of people that have found something new to do in World of Warcraft, people especially fatiguing with Mythic raiding or the difficulty of raiding. It gives you another PvE endgame to raiding option. It's difficult. It fills a unique niche in the fact that it's kind of a team group-based play, but it's also speedrunning at the same time, so it's kind of a niche that's not filled in the esports scene right now. I am concerned about Raider IO and the fact that anything that riffs the community, that makes it less accessible to people that aren't already part of the in crowd, and it's difficult to be on the outside and come in. And I know this is a point of contention with a lot of people that really feel strongly positive about Raider IO. what you're doing is you're creating a society of haves and have-nots. And anytime that happens, it rifts the community. We've seen that with how people felt about cross-realm zones, looking for raid, looking for dungeon, or the looking for group tool when it was introduced. Go back to gear score. You start basing things based on a system outside of the game to be played inside of the game, and that becomes very difficult. And I understand that some of the arguments there are like, well, join a guild so you don't have to deal with Raider.io. If you're with a bunch of friends, you don't have to worry about that. Raider.io is for pugs. So I kind of understand that. But at the same time, if you're a new player or somebody returning to the game and you're trying to queue up or find a group to do this Mythic Plus stuff, I have personal friends that came back to the game and were so frustrated due to Raider.io that they just flat out quit the game. That's a concern for the game. That is not good. So there needs to be some way that we can find a happy space where Raider.io is a useful utility at the same time that it's not segregating the community. And I do worry about esports infiltration into World of Warcraft because it seems like Blizzard is trying to ramrod all of their games into the esports scene. I don't think World of Warcraft is ever going to fit that. I think Mythic Plus is probably its best shot at doing that because it's kind of its own niche. But when a lot of the reason that we've had the class design problems and the class balance problems and the homogenization that we've had across classes in World of Warcraft is due to the fact that they've been balancing around 4 3-man arenas ever since they were introduced in Burning Crusade. So the fact that every class has a heal, every class has a stun, every class has a CC, I think interrupts are kind of a different story, but when it comes to stuns and CC and roots and slows and things like that, when you give everybody that, nobody feels special. I think it does more to detract from the game than to add. And esports makes me worry that if Mythic Plus is very successful, that they're going to start trying to phase out raiding and phase out the old systems out of the game in favor of Mythic Plus trying to shoehorn people into it. That worries me. As far as raids go, I think all of the raids in Legion were pretty solid. I would say Emerald Nightmare and Nightwell were probably my favorites. Tomb of Sargeras, or Tomb of Soak Garrus, as people lovingly, not so lovingly called it, was fatiguing on people. Even to a large degree, Antorus, you have one person mess up and it can wipe the raid. I think there wasn't anything special in the last 2 raids. All of the raids were solid. There wasn't any stinker raids like Dragon Soul. At the same time, there wasn't any raids that really blew your socks off. There was no Throne of Thunder, there was no Ulduar, there was no Ice Crown Citadel, there was no Nax Rammus. It was just, overall, it was good, but it wasn't great. I even think Tier 11 and Cataclysm, I think, was better than any of the tiers of raiding in this expansion. I think Trial of Valor is probably my favorite as far as boss fights go, and as far as immersion goes, kind of the lore story, I think the Nightwell has that. Again, this is another situation where it's kind of a tale of 2 expansions. There's the pre-Broken Shore and there's the post-Broken Shore. Pretty much everything after the Broken Shore, I'm not a huge fan of in Legion. I felt like it was kind of rushed, and I think Legion kind of fell to the back burner, and they were already starting to work on Battle for Azeroth when the Broken Shore stuff came out, and I think you can kind of see that even in the raids. I think Tomb of Sargeras was an okay raid. Not great. Really frustrating from a mechanic standpoint, but if 1 or 2 people screw up, it wipes the entire raid. That can be really frustrating because some people just don't get better at movement. They just don't get better at mechanics, and at some point you're going to have to remove those people from your group for the sake of the raid. So when one person consistently fails at something and they just can't get better at it, that's not very fun. I think Antorus was, to be real frank, I think Antorus was probably one of the more disappointing raids for me. It was not immersive, it was not epic. I felt like going in there, it should have been, we're fighting the biggest of the big bads in Sargeras, and I felt like storming Black Temple with Illidan's armies looking down at us. We have to go through the sewers, up through the sewers, and then we come out into this wide open area where there's a bunch of his army and there's a massive infernal guarding the gate. That was epic. There was nothing really like that in Antorus. It's like, oh, hop in a ship, we'll beam you here. Hop in a ship, we'll beam you here too. I'll kill these few bosses and walk through a bunch of black and green area, and you're fighting bosses, and all of a sudden you're an Argus the Unmaker, and you're fighting him in kind of a different themed room, and that was cool, but it was as far as that goes, but it was just a head scratcher. It's just like, is this supposed to be epic? I mean, it didn't feel great. I mean, the cinematic was pretty cool following it with Sargeras. but the actual fight and the raid itself was really, really lackluster. There was not anything that I would say was memorable about that raid whatsoever. I think the mechanics were fine. I think the boss fights were engaging. But as far as the immersion and the scope and feeling like I was in an important raid doing something really important, it should have felt terrifying. When you go in there as a player, you should feel like you are at the heart of the Burning Legion. There should be things that are terrifying. Why is Sargeras not kind of interacting with us in the same way that Arthas did? We should have gotten some of that with Sargeras. I understand why we're not fighting the Dark Titan, because the guy has a massive sword that can plunge into a planet and cut it in half. There's no way little ants like us are going to do anything against him, but there could have been something more engaging that they did. I was, from somebody who's a lore nut, really disappointed in that. As far as Argus goes, when the Argus patch came out after the Broken Shore, I'm not even going to really talk about the Broken Shore, because that was just not engaging. It felt like grindy content. There's been a lot of content in Legion, a lot of things to do constantly to farm, to keep players engaged. Broken Shore was not. There was a lot of stuff there to do, but it wasn't super memorable to do it. I feel like Argus is better than the Broken Shore in a lot of those fronts, because there's mounts to farm, and there's achievements that you can get. There's things you can actually work towards that are engaging. But at the same time, it's fell green everywhere. And there's not really... There's no bosses that you're fighting. They're just mindless demon minions. There's no demon bosses that you really engage on Argus and who have a conversation with you that you feel like, I really need to kill this guy. He's going to stop us from being successful. There was no real moment of that. I never felt like there was any real danger on Argus. Even the story with Illidan, the Illidan cinematic was absolutely fantastic on the way to Argus with Velen. Really well done. The Illidan cinematic with Zera, it probably stands out as my favorite in-game cinematic ever done in this game. And that's counting Angrathar the Wrathgate. That was really well done back then in Wrath of the Lich King, but that moment with Illidan and Zera, nobody expected Illidan to be basically shackled by this being of light, and she was going to force her values upon him. And Zera, to this point, as far as the lore goes, the light has never done anything evil or bad or wrong. It's always been very lawful good. So this was the first time that really broke away from that. And then Illidan destroying Zera so easily with his power just shows how immensely powerful. That was a really cool moment. But the problem with that was they never followed that up with Illidan. We tag along, Illidan sends us out on quests, and Illidan's killing random demons. Illidan's killing demons out there. He's swinging his glaives. He's, making all these threatening comments. But there's no interaction. Like, I would have loved to have seen Sargeras talking to us and then Illidan talking to us during the raid and Illidan, protecting us while we advance in another direction. To feel like Illidan was really the prime guy that was making sure that this was going to happen. He was the bulwark. It didn't really happen that way. I mean, the character development and the story development in the second half of this expansion they just let it kind of fall away to game mechanics. And as somebody who likes and enjoys the lore, I was really disappointed in that. Why does Illidan stay? How does he subsist? How does he eat when he stays with the Pantheon after Sargeras is defeated and he's jailing them? Where's Maiev? Why is Maiev not staying with Illidan? What happened to Maiev? Where is she? What's going on? Does this mean that the Pantheon can start helping us again? Because I know they have Sargeras jailed. There's just a lot of lore. It felt like they were trying to do something cool by sticking a sword in a planet, but they didn't know how to get there or the story to tell to make it feel special. Other than there's that one epic moment, but after that it just feels kind of flat. One of the big systems that I haven't really talked about yet that was a major point of Legion, which was a major point of contention, was legendaries, also known as quote-unquote legendaries. It was a really great concept, but it was implemented poorly. I think the utility legendaries overall were okay as far as balance goes. The ones that made or break specs, like, for example, on my Unholy Death Knight, Cold Heart is just remarkably better for single target damage than most of the other legendaries. And it felt like if you really wanted to be a successful Unholy Death Knight, you had to have that item. But there's no way to farm that item. You just have to play the game and hope it drops for you. That doesn't feel good. Anything that makes or breaks specs based on damage or survivability or healing is not good. So I think overall, if the legendaries were just utility legendaries, I think they would have been great. The problem is when some of those involved damaging abilities or shortening cooldowns for said damage abilities. I think that was the theme of this expansion as far as RNG goes as a whole. It felt like we were going into a casino, win or lose. We were at a casino. We were putting quarters into the slot machine, pulling the lever, seeing what came out. And we'd get something, we'd win, and we'd go, oh, yeah, I won! And then you see how much you won, and you'd be, oh, that's not that much. And that's kind of how legendaries felt. There was very few times that winning a legendary felt good. Most of the time, it just felt like, even if you were getting a good legendary, it felt like a relief, like, oh, thank God it dropped. And that's not a good feeling. Moving on with the RNG, there was just too much of it. I think RNG is good in an MMO, and I think there's a place for RNG in this game and other MMOs. I think it's part of what makes it stay exciting, and having some casino aspects to the game where things are random is fun, and it's engaging, and it gives you that moment of thrill, that little boost of endorphins of, oh yeah! I think that's good, but to a certain degree, you don't want everything to be that. I guess as far as RNG goes, I'm okay with Warforging when you go up 5, 10, even 15 item levels. Titan Forging is just too much. Titan Forging needs to be gone from the game. There's no reason to have Titan Forging, where you can have an 860 item become a 960 item or something ridiculous like that. It's too much. It's okay to make some of this content to be relevant for most of the expansion, but for it to become old at some point. Stuff doesn't need to stay relevant the entirety of the expansion for it to be engaging. I think class balance overall, as far as PvE goes, has been pretty good throughout the expansion. Some specs just weren't that viable throughout the expansion. Some of them they've fixed a little bit here and there. Frost mages aren't in a very good spot. Survival hunters are fairly strong, but they're not super engaging to play because of how the rotation works. Kind of the same thing with Demonology, and Outlaw is so RNG heavy that people get really frustrated by it. I think there's a lot of good ideas that were in these redesigns of some of these specs, but I think some of the things were poorly implemented. Certain specs weren't viable for endgame modes, like Shadow Priests. Nobody wants a Shadow Priest in Mythic Plus dungeons because of the way that they work. There's not really a whole lot to say about professions. They're a complete joke. There's no excuse in my mind whatsoever that professions are in as sorry of a state as they are in World of Warcraft. Professions have never been less relevant in World of Warcraft than they are right now. And World of Warcraft has never done a good job, as far as MMOs are concerned, in the professions front. They need a massive revamp of this system. At this point, professions are almost as much of a minigame as pet battles. There's only 1 to 2 valuable professions in the game right now, and the World of Warcraft developers really need to take a look at that and fix it, because professions are one of those things that people can play as an endgame, just like working the auction house. It's one of those things that people that enjoy solo play that might not want to do group content might really enjoy. Like, if you're somebody who is a master blacksmith, that used to mean something. You have patterns, you have things that other people don't have. Other people know you and come to you for those recipes. How long has it been since we've had that? Like, if they're not going to fix professions, just delete them from the game. They're detracting from it. They're not adding to the game. I feel very strongly about how professions have gone in the game. I'm just kind of disgusted by it. PvP is another one of those areas. I think the prestiging system, I thought it was interesting. I do enjoy it. I PvP fairly frequently. It's fun, but it's not rewarding again. And this is kind of a theme throughout Legion, is there's a lot of things that are engaging to do, but you don't get any reward on it because it takes either so long to grind it out that it just feels like a taxing grind, or it feels like everything's RNG based. So long story short, PvP has been great for alts because there's no gearing required. Everybody has these stat templates that goes in. I can go in there, hit 110 and start crushing people that are in 960 gear with my guy in 840 item level. I mean, that's great if you play a lot of alts like me, but if you're somebody that, really works on playing one character, that's incredibly frustrating. So it's terrible for mains, and it's great for people that like to play alts a lot like me. World PvP is, like professions, is completely and officially dead. They've done nothing to make World PvP viable this expansion. It was not in a good state when it came in, but it is just completely dead. To give a good example, I could go out with my Blood Death Knight, who at the time was only around 900 item level, And I could be fighting people in 940 item level gear and take 6 of them on at a single time with my Blood Death Knight. And kill all of them. That's not fun. That's not engaging. There's no counterplay to that. They made no attempt whatsoever to balance world PvP. They just kind of threw up their hands and went, you know, we're just going to kind of balance instanced PvP and everything else we don't really care about. It's just not engaging to be one-shot when you're maxed out on gear and you're completely mythic raid geared and a subtlety rogue comes up and one-shots you out in the world. I don't know in what mindset Blizzard thought that that would be an okay thing. Like, kind of going over some of the missed opportunities. I think the drama between Sylvanas and Gen Greymane that took place in Stormheim could have been built up better. That was the only Alliance versus Horde story really throughout the entirety of the expansion. So if you're a player that's coming in to Legion late and you just kind of skip Stormheim, you're not going to see any Alliance versus Horde content whatsoever. I also felt like a big letdown was between the Legion and us. They didn't build up any new characters. There was no new demon lords that made us feel like we should be fearful. Or they didn't kill any important characters. There was no build-up and there was no payoff. We were just killing... It felt like we were almost farming demons, for the lack of a better sake. It's just, I mean, grab a Sith and start cutting them down. They're all over the place. They're numerous. You know, we need like some kind of exterminator to come in here and just purge all these things. So we don't really know what happened between Illidan and Maiev. We know that they're at odds with each other, but there was... I mean, what happened with that? Illidan stays on a spaceship, and Maiev is... Who knows where she is, or how she feels, or what's going on. Illidan leaves a crystal for Malfurion and Tyrande. Tyrande, because of how little lore it seems like... It makes Tyrande seem like she's a complete witch of a woman, which she has a lot of justification... People that played Warcraft 3 know that she has a lot of justification as to why she's upset with Illidan. She broke Illidan out of prison, which hurt her reputation. You know, it made Malfurion not trust her. And then Illidan kind of did some stuff, that, you know, that after that made Tyrande look like a fool. So obviously Tyrande doesn't trust Illidan, and with good reason, from a story perspective. But there's no payoff on that. There's no payoff with Malfurion and an interaction with Illidan too. It's just like, oh, well, he's my brother, and Tyrande's, oh, well, he's Malfurion's brother, and who knows what we've really thought about him. It's just, I don't know. There's no story connection to Illidan. I mean, we build up and we're unlocking all this backstory of Illidan, why he's a good guy and how he's been doing all these things ultimately for... He's been doing bad things, but for the greater good. There's a lot of unceremonious things that happen with lore characters. I mean, Tyrion Fordring was a great example. This guy killed the Lich King. We didn't kill the Lich King. He killed the Lich King. The Lich King killed us and is resurrecting us. He breaks out of a frost icicle and, you know, breaks Frostmourne. This guy is an iconic character, and all of a sudden he's just captured at the beginning of the expansion by Gul'dan. Gul'dan's holding him up in a bubble, and he gets thrown into the Fel and he dies. Where did that come from? Why was there not a story in the background where we were following Tyrion Fordring to understand, like, he's fighting, there's these bad things that are happening, he doesn't know why they're happening, but we're fighting them anyway. Instead, we're following Khadgar. I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me as far as storytelling goes. To be honest, I don't think Blizzard knows what it's doing with its own storytelling. I think that's a large reason that they hired Christy Golden, was to kind of consolidate and be kind of a lore master of sorts. Again, I think Antorus was not epic at all. It should have felt like the most epic raid of all time. It was lackluster. It was not huge. It was not dangerous. I mean, I felt more threatened going into Black Temple as a new character than fighting the Lord of the Burning Legion. I mean, and I think that's a pretty dismal payoff. Like I said, Sargeras could have popped up during the raid and done random things. Maybe he could have empowered some trash mobs to do certain things, or random stuff. I mean, Blizzard loves their RNG. Why didn't they throw some into their raids, like in the trash mobs? Not talking about the bosses, but like trash mobs to make it a little bit different, where it's showing his influence, where he's putting his hand directly, you know, his thumb on the scale. We don't have any sense of him putting his thumb on the scale whatsoever. It's like he has his demon minions that are over here doing their own thing, and he's just giving the orders. He can't really be bothered with what's going on. So in conclusion, Legion did very few things well, but it didn't do a whole lot incredibly wrong. Legion was a massive improvement over Warlords of Draenor in almost every area. Top to bottom, I would say objectively, it was World of Warcraft's best expansion to date. Subjectively, I think I would probably count it third or fourth on my list as far as expansions go. All of the raids and dungeons were engaging. Instance PvP was more balanced for the most part than it has been in a long time. Leveling was great. It didn't feel like a grind. Mythic Plus adds a ton to the game and maybe the most successful system since transmogrification. Even a lot of the retconned lore like Illidan, I didn't have an issue with. I thought most of it was good. The problem I had with it was there was no payoff with most of it. I think the Secrets Discord and the Secrets community really felt amazing for an MMO community. I was disappointed with the lack of congruent storyline outside of Suramar. I got tired of Fell Green after about 2 weeks into the expansion. Professions and world PvP have never been in a worse state in this game. I miss the entire feeling of feeling like a mercenary and an explorer. I don't need to be the hero. We as players don't need to be the heroes. There's too much power creep into the game, and there's too much power fantasy. We don't all need to be the Dragonborn. We don't all need to wield the artifact weapons. Can we please just be mercenaries and explorers? Pull back a little bit of our power. Why can't we just be those again? I think the game was far more engaging from a story standpoint as us as mercenaries than us as heroes. So with all of that said, I think Legion has World of Warcraft headed in the right direction for the first time in a long time. Since before Dragon Soul. I think it's been that long that I've been disenchanted with the game in the direction it's been headed. I think Ian Hazzikostas is a great game director. I think he's doing everything that the game needs to. I'm really looking forward to how Battle for Azeroth turns out. I'm a little bit concerned with the fact that there's a little bit of a lack of details. I'm hoping that maybe they're just trying to keep us excited and keep the hype train up and kind of surprise us. But to be honest, after how Warlords of Draenor turned out, I feel a little bit skeptical. So everybody in the comments below, let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know what you think of these opinions. Let me know how you felt about World of Warcraft Legion and what you're looking forward to in Battle for Azeroth. My name has been Kind Death, and have a good day.